Good morning, Commissioner Havel.
Good morning, Janelle.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner Foster.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you.
President Hubble, I'll have a few comments before the commission considers a consent calendar.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Good morning, Marty. Good morning, Vanessa.
Good morning. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Marty, let's try that again. Can you give us?
Sorry, did you say something? I was getting my headphones in.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep. Good morning. Just wanted to sound check. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. No problem. Good morning.
Good morning, Janelle.
Good morning.
I'm connected via my cell phone. I'm having some computer problems today.
Who is? I'm sorry, but I need to ask who this is because I'm scanning my logins.
This is Brad Murphy.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Sarah. I see you joined us as well.
Good morning.
Thank you. Commissioner Murphy, I don't even see you in the panel, so thank you for saying good morning so we know you're with us.
Good morning, it's Wilson.
Good morning, Commissioner Wilson.
Okay, welcome everybody. Glad to see Tom back. I'll call the meeting to order. It's 8 o'clock or a little after. Let's see, welcome to any of our guests that are present virtually and or joining us online, I should say. Let's see where I get the Janelle, would you like to go through the virtual meeting guidance, please?
Certainly. Good morning, commissioners, members of the public and staff. To help us have a smooth meeting, I'm just going to review a few decorum rules for everyone. Number one, please ensure your mic is muted unless you're speaking. Number two, please state your name before speaking. Number 3, in general, please have your cameras on if possible. If you are speaking, you may turn your cameras off if you're experiencing technological challenges. This goes for staff too when you are presenting. And number 4, as a reminder, the public chat has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host if need be. And the meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. So let's have a great meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. We have the introduction of the Health, Safety, and Security Leader, Marcus Canty.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Mike Lipsky. I'm the Human Resources Manager here at the district, and it's my pleasure to be able to introduce, or for maybe some of you, reintroduce our Health, Safety, and Security Leader, Marcus Canty, here at the district. Marcus previously served as the Health, Safety, and Security Leader at the district from 2012 to 2019, and when our opening came up, he was excited to throw his hat in the ring and come back and work at the district again. Marcus is an occupational health and safety professional with almost 20 years of experience in developing and managing safety and health programs in multiple industries, including manufacturing, highway transportation, radiation assembly, and utilities. Marcus is particularly proud of his work to transform organizational culture from one of merely compliance and viewing safety as an obstacle to a safety culture of ownership where safety is fully integrated into operations and processes. Throughout these endeavors, he has survived OSHA and DOT inspections without fines, while also building employee confidence, knowledge, and engagement to help achieve health and safety excellence. It's exciting for Marcus to be able to come back to the district. I think it speaks very highly of the district that Marcus was willing to come back and resume work here at the district. And in his time away, he's been pursuing his Associate Safety Professional certification and will be testing shortly for his Certified Safety Professional certification. So I'm excited to have Marcus as part of the team and to welcome him back to the district.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Welcome back, Marcus. I thought your name seemed familiar, I guess. Okay, let's see. Announcements. Michael, do you have any announcements?
President Hubble, I do not have any announcements today.
Okay, do we have any appearances by the public? Okay, seeing none. Michael, you had some comments on the consent calendar before we move?
Yes, I do. I do 3 items very quickly. It's rare I speak so much about the consent calendar. You'll notice there are revised minutes that are included in the consent calendar for the meeting that the commission held on May 13th, and they're there for reapproval. You may recall at the last meeting, Commissioner Meyer had a question about my CED update related to the notice of the foaming incident. And we went back, I checked my notes. I keep usually fairly detailed notes at the meeting. And then we also have the added benefit of reviewing the video, and the minutes were corrected to accurately reflect my report. So that's in your packet. This is probably more for the public than for the commission, but you'll note on consent today, there is a $14 million bond approval on consent. And for the public who doesn't work that closely with the district, you may seem like that's odd to have such a large commitment on the consent calendar without commission deliberation and discussion. And I want to just let the public know that the commission reviews the funding strategy several times a year, but mostly during the CIP in the summer, usually in late June or early July, about how we want to fund infrastructure related projects. And then that is confirmed by approval of the budget in October, where the source of funds is authorized. So really what this is the action that's on consent is more a formality at this point, but an extremely important formality, as the state requires us, since this is a clean water fund loan, to have the right signatures to move forward without delay, so we can pay contractors for work that's already performed. The final thing in the minutes is you'll notice the operating guidelines, the study session that we had at the last meeting regarding interest-based problem solving. And I did not do a verbatim transcript. I tried to lump the comments into separating principle from process and consolidate similar ideas into something that is a little bit more cohesive. So if the commission sees something that's missing in that summary, please, you can shoot me an email or say so during the meeting here, and we can correct them. But really, it's not a formal document. It's just a working document that we want to use in future meetings. So with that said, President Hubble, I'll turn consent calendar back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So we have a rather large consent calendar, the cash statement, capital projects, and then operating, the approval of the 2 sets of minutes, or reapproval of the one, reapproval of the second. We have 4 new construction projects, 2 in DeForest, 2 in Madison, and we have 3 reconstruction projects. I think they're all in the city of Madison. Sure, or one's our 2 in Madison. Well, they're all one is our project, MMSD. We have reviewed bids at a contract for 2021 televising and cleaning. Review of bids and approval of transaction for Dell computer purchase for Windows 10 upgrade, and then the bond sale for the sale of obligation promissory notes that Michael was just discussing. Do we have any comments or questions on any of those items before we get a motion? Okay, I don't see anybody. So do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
This is Commissioner Eskridge. I'll move adoption of the consent calendar.
Okay, we have a motion.
Commissioner Meyer, happy to second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Eskridge, second by Commissioner Meyer. Thank you both. To approve the consent calendar, all those in favor say aye.
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 And those opposed? None. The motion carries. Okay, that will take us to our topics. The first one is the accept work and closeout project, Northeast Interceptor Joint Grouting Manhole to Manhole. Manhole 10-112 to Manhole 10-106. Rachel File, you're gonna introduce this?
Yes. Okay, are you able to see my screen in presentation mode?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Commission. I'm Rachel File, project engineer, and today I'd like to present the Northeast Interceptor Joint Grouting Manhole 10-112 to Manhole 10-106 project to the Commission for acceptance of work. The project location is shown here in red. The project is over near the intersection of Highway 30 and Highway 51 on the east side of Madison. North of that intersection, the Northeast Interceptor runs on the north side and then continues on the west side of that intersection before reaching Pump Station 10. And there are 2 parallel lines that make up this Northeast Interceptor. One was constructed in 1964 and is 48-inch diameter reinforced concrete pipe. The routine district inspection recently of this 1964 sewer revealed that the pipe was in good structural condition, but numerous joints were suffering from inflow and infiltration, or known as I&I. So here are some photos of the district's inspection of the interceptor. As you can see in these photos, there are leaks of I&I located at the pipe joint itself where water is coming in. And I&I is an issue for two reasons. One, it takes away capacity from our interceptor, and two, it represents water that is being unnecessarily pumped and treated. So leaks such as these can be addressed by joint grouting. Joint grouting is a technology that uses a donut-shaped piece of equipment known as a packer. This packer is placed inside the existing pipe at that leaky joint and pumps out grout to seal the leak. So here, wanted to share two photos, two different views of the packer. So first, the front view of the packer when it's inside the pipe. And in this view, you can see the rigid blue skeleton or frame of the packer, which supports on the outside a tan soft skin that seals against the pipe on both sides of the joint to create a seal to allow us to pump grout out. Now, on the side view of the packer here, you can get a better view of what that skin looks like that seals up against the pipe. You'll notice there are two ridges here, which essentially straddle the joint here in the middle. And when inflated, these ridges create that seal, front and back, with the joint in the middle. And this is where the grout comes out, up against the joint. Again, it's pushed out and right into that leak itself to seal it up. The last thing I want to mention about this packer is that it rides on wheels. And you'll notice that, and this packer is pulled from joint to joint with a winch system. It's connected to a truck, and those grout holes are actually connected to hoses that go back up to the truck that bring the grout down to the packer. So again, this process is repeated joint after joint to seal a line. So equally important as the packer is the grout. The grout itself is made by mixing a catalyst and acrylamide. And you can see here when these two are mixed, in the presence of water, they turn into a solid. And you could actually turn this cup upside down and the gel wouldn't fall out. So again, when these chemicals come together in the presence of water and the outside water is that leak, it solidifies itself to stop the leak. So now putting this together, this packer technology and the grout, I want to share another video. So here in this video, here's the leak at the joint, and the packer for this video is shown in black. And so we'll see here, the packer is moving into position, inflating itself to create that seal, and now grouting, sending grout out to seal that up. And to give you a real world example from our project, I'm going to share a few videos which show a single joint before, during, and after grouting. So this here is the before video. You can see the pipe joint back here. There's actually 3 leaks, one at the top, one at the right, one at the left. You can get a sense of how quickly these leaks are flowing into our current pipe. And this here is the during video. So this is, the packer is in the pipe here. It's moving in on this joint. Well, in the video, you'll see this is that joint. You'll see a little bit of water coming out the backside. It's right about to inflate. So this is right before it inflates and get that seal. But just to show you, it's in the pipe and it's about to seal itself. Now, this is the after video. So after the pipe has pressed up against the wall of the pipe, sealed and pumped grout. So in this video, the packer is currently sitting on that leaky joint. And when it moves, we should be able to see if the leaks were fixed. So here it's pulling away from the joint. And here in white, that is the grout ring. From the grout, no more leaks are present at this joint, so we have successfully sealed this joint. This joint is just one of the 280 joints that were grouted from this project. And overall, this project eliminated approximately over 28,000 gallons per day of I&I. And this translates into increased capacity, energy, and cost savings. I also want to mention that this project was the first time we at the district have grouted large 48-inch diameter pipe of this size. This project is also the first of 2 projects to continue to address leaks in the Northeast Interceptor. There will be a second forthcoming project that will continue down the line addressing leaks to Pump Station 10. So moving on now to project financials. Just from a contractor perspective, Michaels Corporation was awarded the project. Their bid amount was approximately $208,000. During the course of construction, there were 3 change orders. And at the end, overall, the total amount was less than that of the bid amount, approximately 8% below, or $191,000 approximately dollars. Now, from an overall project standpoint, including costs such as district labor with the contractor's construction cost, the total approved budget for this project was $304,000. Now, at the end of the project, with all costs included, we are significantly below that at approximately $201,000. And finally, to speak to the project schedule, the work started in 2020 and the project schedule was extended by 6 months. This did not pose any problems to the district, and the project was substantially complete in March of this year. So in conclusion, this Northeast Interceptor joint grouting project has been completed and has reduced I&I. A resolution has been drafted to accept the work. The district will hold a $10,000 maintenance retainer. $5,000 of that $10,000 will be held as a retainer for the 11-month post-grouting televising and will be released thereafter. The remaining $5,000 is a typical maintenance retainer, which will be released at 1 year. So approval is requested to accept the work and make final payment. With that, are there any questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel. Interesting what technology can do. Anybody have any questions?
Rachel, maybe you could just explain briefly what why the project cost went down.
Sure. So like I mentioned, this was the first time that we have grouted pipe of this size diameter. And also this is a relatively old pipe from 1964. So there were some existing conditions of this pipe that caused us to use a different type of grout. If you remember in the video, the grout was originally green at the end. That's the type of grout that is most traditionally and commonly used. But you'll notice in the video, the grout ring was white. So we ended up switching grout types to a more expensive grout that's white, which has an additive in it to help with the existing conditions on our pipe. But ultimately, it's a stronger grout, so we use less overall in quantity. So basically a stronger grout, so we didn't use as much of it as we thought, and that actually worked in our favor at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. Beth, you had a question?
Yeah, a great presentation. Thank you. And it's really amazing technology. I'm really impressed with that. That's great. I just have a quick question about the lifespan of the grout. How long do we expect that to last?
Sure. So grout such as this has been around for the last 60 years in the industry. So we definitely know that data. Speaking further than that, there have been studies conducted by the U.S. Department of Energy that indicate the half-life could be anywhere from 100 to 300 years old in terms of how long it'll last. Obviously, every case is different, and this is like I mentioned, a fairly new technology for us. So we're interested, but it looks promising in terms of the lifespan. And I guess one thing to add with water is you're always fighting against it. It's always looking for the easiest place to go. So that's why we are continuing on with our I&I program as we sealed the pipe, and now looking to hone in on other areas that water might travel to.
Okay, Sarah, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks also, Rachel, for your presentation, and thanks for your question, Beth, because it kind of sets up what my question was going to be, which is to say, when we're now thinking about this as a technology that we can use, is this in some ways preemptive to a full lining of a pipe? And if so, can you just give us like a broad sense cost savings or life of asset change when we have this as a potential option for perhaps earlier intervention with the pipes rather than going through the full lining?
Sure. So it is a first step that can be used to seal off leaks before lining. And you're absolutely right that it's the first step there if that's the chosen recommended way to go. In terms of numbers, I don't have anything for you in terms of hard and fast numbers, but it does make sense in some pipes like this one where structurally they're good. They just need a little bit of TLC, if you will, at the joints. And long-term lining is a possibility, yes.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So if this is the first time we've used this on that large of a pipe, would past pipes have been lined? I think is the question that Sarah was asking.
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay.
I believe the previous project that we did with joint grouting was on a 27-inch diameter, and that one was lined. This one, I believe the intent in the far future is to line this pipe down the road as funds become available. Yes.
And I have a question. Do they have to clean the old grout out?
So this pipe here has rubber joints between it, and the leaks, the water, either maybe that rubber has deteriorated over time, or just, there's a gap in it. So the rubber is on the outside, it kind of more, it's harder to get to, but if the contractor did see they call it the rubber gasket, like hanging down, they would remove it. But we're not looking to remove all of the seals, but just to push this grout into the problem areas, because removing all of the the rubber gaskets would be very involved, and then you're probably digging down into the sewer. They're not easy to get to from the inside of the pipe, but sometimes they are visible when you watch the televising videos.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I wanted to make a comment, maybe circling back on Commissioner Eskridge's question. Maybe at a future project update, we can share with you. I think you asked a really interesting asset management question around the cost of rehabilitation and the different methods. And I know Bruce could probably say off the top of his head the cost per foot for a lining project versus the grouting. But maybe during our next project update, we can provide a little bit more information on that.
That'd be great, Michael. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Michael. Okay, seeing no other questions, excuse me, do we have a motion to accept the work? Excuse, to accept the
Wilson,
work
I'll
of the
move
close
a-
out the
I'll-
project?
It's Wilson, Tom. I'll move approval of the resolution accepting the work and closing out the project as
Okay,
presented.
we have a motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by,
I'll second Tom. Commissioner Clark.
okay, second by Commissioner Clark. Motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by Commissioner Clark. Do we have any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? None? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Rachel. That will move us to Marty is going to lead off the study session on biosolids management.
Good morning, commissioners. Let me just pop my camera on here. All right, thanks. So this morning, I'm gonna give a little overview of our biosolids management study recommendations that we undertook over this past year, or 2020, I should say. So the district has always been generating biosolids as a byproduct of our wastewater treatment, and the disposal of biosolids is really an unavoidable step for the plant to continue operating. So we've really always looked for ways to improve the management and reuse of our biosolids and accomplish disposal in a way that's environmentally beneficial. You can see here, there's an old photo from the 1930s. And this is when we really began this beneficial reuse where we air dried our biosolids on sand drying beds and was sold locally as a fertilizer called nitro humus. But it was a very labor intensive process. And so during the Great Depression in the 40s with the labor shortages, that's when the district switched to using lagoons as storage. And then we began land application on agricultural farm fields in 1974. And the brand name MetroGrow was coined in the late 70s. And that's when the MetroGrow program was officially launched. In 1993, that's when the current storage tanks, the 3 large storage tanks visible from the maintenance facility, those were completed. And then the last type of operational change to our biosolids program was in the early 2000s, where we made an addition to our digestion process to allow us to create different quality of biosolids called Class A biosolids quality. And that's when we began to experiment with other ways to utilize Class A biosolids. And so throughout this presentation, I may be mentioning the words Class A biosolid or Class B biosolid, or you may see a slide with those terms. And just to give a little clarity on that, the biosolids quality is regulated by the EPA and the DNR, and they categorize them into 2 different classes. And depending on the class of biosolid changes the way you can handle, distribute, reuse. So I just kind of keep that in mind as we go through here. On the right side of this slide, you can see that I have a screenshot of the commission policy outcomes. So this description of our history of beneficial reuse has really manifested itself in our commission policy outcomes. And we really are ensuring that we take this holistic approach to biosolids reuse. And so we want to be part of this resource recovery cycle. And so our current program is land application. We spread biosolids on farm fields. It's a valuable nutrient. So as we move toward options for the future, we still want to continue taking this holistic approach and making sure that the nutrients we collect through our wastewater process, even though we have biosolids we have to deal with, we want to make sure that these nutrients are returned to the food cycle where they originated. And this really does help with other district programs when we take this holistic approach, namely our 20-year adaptive management project, which is focusing on nutrients and water quality improvements. So our current approach of land application is facing increased pressure, labor demands, program cost, and our cost effectiveness is being challenged. And the reasons, are some of these ideas you see up on the screen here. Our agricultural land has increasing regulatory and operational requirements. And some of our customers, our farming customers, are changing the way they farm. Farming is moving forward. And they may be moving toward a type of cropping system or a type of farming where they're interested in soil conservation, and maybe our program doesn't meet some of their requirements in terms of soil disturbance. And then we look at where land application program for agricultural land, but as changing land use occurs in our area, namely increasing urbanization, those pose challenges with distances to get to farm fields, and other challenges. And then of course, climate change and weather impacts, that really affects the time of year we can apply on farm fields. So our application windows are very challenged when it comes to the climate change, predicting increased precipitation and intensity of rain. Wet weather does not go well with trying to put fertilizer on farm fields. So that was a trigger for the biosolids management plan. So in 2020, like I mentioned, we decided to embark on this journey to identify concrete practical steps to develop solutions to sustain our operations. And so I come to you twice in 2020 to give you updates. And today I'm going to really just give you the breakdown of the exact recommendations. But the purpose of the study really is to help us understand alternatives to our program that's going to reduce or eliminate those challenges and concerns that I showed on the previous screen. And so as we better understand these alternatives, then we're in a better position to have a more flexible product distribution and be less dependent on some of those things that are posing challenges for us. So how do we do this? The first thing we did is we did a program assessment. We assessed our existing program, and then that helps us get a baseline of what's happening. And so then we can identify, are there any administrative or management or infrastructure bottlenecks that we need to hone in on when we look at what a future might look like. We then had to develop metrics to inform a quadruple bottom line analysis. And so these are scoring metrics that said, we're going to account for economic, environment, social, what our customer wants, and our operational criteria. And these metrics are going to give us a score to help us evaluate this list of alternatives where we're looking towards the future. And then we actually evaluated as alternatives against each other, also comparing it to our current baseline processes. And so we wanted to see which processes that we identified on our list actually were going to meet our interests related to the quadruple bottom line. So that three-tiered approach really helped us answer these three key questions. Which types of products are desired by the market? I talked about some of the challenges with our current products and operations. Which products are going to be complementary toward our resource recovery goals? We have commission outcomes. We've been recovering resources for a while. We want to continue meeting those goals. And then which of these options that are out there are really going to be the easiest for us to integrate into stuff we're already doing? It's always good to look at how we can move forward with the least amount of disruption. As you know, we run a very large ship, and sometimes it's hard to turn the rudder so quickly. And then two other things that sort of our underlying thoughts with these questions is the timing. How fast can we do something like this? I gave the ship example, but then also making sure that whatever path we do ultimately decide on, it really utilizes a flexible platform that allows us to investigate and implement maybe additional alternatives on a different type of time scale. So what did we find out? Well, the first thing we found out was a Class A biosolids product, like an enhanced product, is going to always provide a higher level of customer value and environmental benefit. So it really, in the quadruple bottom line analysis, scored super high in those two areas. However, for a Class A product, they cost more. And so when you look at the economics, it's hard to justify a jump immediately to a Class A product. And that's because the second thing we found was that a Class B product is a lot cheaper and is a better flexible platform for jumping to a Class A. So even though it may have scored lower on some of the environmental benefits or what the customer may want, it seems to be a more logical path to start with, as we ultimately maybe at the end of the road could get to an enhanced product. So we're not saying that this choice is over another choice. We're saying that this choice makes sense in an incremental approach because of the benefits related to the economic, social, and environment. The other piece of this is our global data management. So we looked at the baseline of the program. We found that, improving our data management will help with whatever product we go to. So investment in that type of system is also important. And before we say, okay, well, Class B cake's cheaper, maybe people might want it, we don't really know. We need to do some more research. This study was really meant to give us what are the quadruple bottom line analysis on our options. And now we have these options, which one looks promising? And if it does, now we need to do our applied research to figure out, first of all, can we make this type of product that seems promising operationally, dewatering techniques and such? And also, is this something our customer really is going to want? Is it going to address those challenges that we talked about? On paper, it seems like it does, but we need to really do further market analysis and get out, in the fields and test some of these products. So, I mentioned that Class B is the flexible platform, and I'll also mention that the reason why it's ultimately flexible, as I said, it can get us to a Class A. And so you can use a Class B product and do further enhancement and create a Class A. So, as we do this research and figure out if a Class B is actually viable, that's going to inform the next steps. Because if the answer to that is yes, there's a Class B product that our customers want, meets their needs, then we will maybe look at further planning to beef up and switch ultimately to that type of program. However, if the research says something different, says, we can't make a Class B product work, maybe we have to look at jumping to a Class A. That's something we'd have to plan for as well. So the roadmap does give us some flexibility as to answering some questions and utilizing off-ramps and different decisions. And that directly impacts the length of time that it's going to take for us to put investment toward some of these options, right? So to wrap it all up, we're looking to change our recovered resources to a better viable product to address those challenges, because these challenges that I mentioned earlier are actually opportunities with the right product, right? Just switching from liquid, our current program, to a drier product, or a product that has additional organics, or a product that doesn't require tillage, really can change the way nutrients are handled, keep soil out of the waterways, improve soil health. Products can be applied in more areas than just on the farm. Maybe it can be applied in areas outside the farm field, And so that leverages our changing land use. And of course, products that could be stored, stacked, not at our plant, but somewhere else where the user can apply it when needed, maybe doesn't rely on weather windows for application. So it creates more resilience. So that's really what I have to say. This is the last slide here is just kind of giving more of a concrete timeline to that roadmap I mentioned, approximately what we're thinking of, how long it might take to do some of these things. And so I wanted you to have this information as we lead into the study session questions. You'll notice the asterisk on the Class B cake. That's because of what I mentioned, that we have to see if that's actually a viable product. So if it is, this is the timeline. If it isn't, that middle step would be used researching maybe other product to lead toward planning for something permanent. So here are the questions I wanted you guys to contemplate. And with that, I'll open up for any questions first and listen to any discussion. Thanks.
Okay, Ezra, you have a question? And then Grant?
Thank you. Yeah. Hey, Marty. Good presentation. Thanks for all the good work on this. I wanted to ask, and I'll admit, I read the executive summary, but not the huge attached report. But I'm wondering about those environmental benefits, at least in the net of the Class A product. Just if you can explain a little bit what those are. I mean, I get the value added to the customer, that side of the ledger, but I'm wondering about those environmental improvements when you compare Class B as we do now with switching to Class A.
Hey, can I interrupt 1 second? Marty, is Class A cake, is that similar to Milorganite, a fertilizer, or is it different?
So yeah, I'll clarify Class A. So Class A cake is not similar to Milorganite. Milorganite is a Class A product. If you want to use a similar term like cake, you would use something like a dried pelletized product. So Milorganite is a Class A, but it's different than a Class A cake.
Okay, I'm just wanting to get an idea of how this stuff fits within the hierarchy of what I know. And then sorry, Bezra, but one other question was the Metro Mix that we attempted to make for a while. Is that a Class B cake or is that something else?
So the Metro Mix that we attempted was utilizing a Class A cake. So, but if I want to get into a little bit of the technique, we create a Class B cake and through further manipulation can create a Class A cake. So that's what we did. And then we added fillers, so to speak, like sawdust, something like that to sort of bulk it up. And so it was a Class A product, but it was its own thing, not like Milorganite. So that's what that was.
Okay, I would just thank you. So you can go ahead and answer as I just
Sure.
wanted to get an idea of where we fit within all
Appreciate
that.
the friendly amendment questions, definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
As a Commissioner Meyer, let me just make sure I remember your question was more explanation on the environmental benefit of a Class A product.
Exactly.
Okay, so Class A product, depending on what environmental benefit you're focusing on, you can gain something. If you look at nutrients, we apply fertilizer, but soil health is important. And so with a Class A product, you have options for maybe adding organic material to change the agronomics of the product. With a Class A product, you also have options for the product, I guess, weight, type, shape. It's not just liquid, right? It's some type of solid that you can manipulate and make it operationally easier. So when you're talking about environmental impact, you can have more precise application. You can apply it in a way that maybe doesn't have to be injected in the ground to account for runoff. You can store it in a way that is safer. You could also create in a way that maybe the release of nutrients is different, the availability could be different. So there's quite a few things you can play around with when looking at environmental benefit.
That helps, Marty. So, and am I safe in sort of summarizing and saying those benefits tend to be sort of out there at the end use point? Versus sort of, I was thinking of other kinds of environmental benefits, pros and cons. You know, I think some of these products would require a lot more drying, which means they'd have a lot more energy use and carbon footprint potentially, which cuts the other direction. But I'm hearing you talk about a lot of benefits sort of out there at the end use and how they impact or don't impact the environment. Is that right?
That's correct. And, you know, I didn't talk about environmental impact of operationally that you just mentioned. And so, yes, there are differences, but I would say there are many different ways to create a Class A product and different Class A products. And each of those have different, if you want to sum it up, carbon footprint or energy implications. That was analyzed and was put into the environmental category. So when we looked at the quadruple bottom line, the environmental category does account for some of those energy considerations as well as the end user environmental considerations.
That's great. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Grant, then Beth.
Thank you, Marty. This is really exciting stuff. Could you speak a little bit about how the question of emerging contaminants played into evaluation, or how you see it might play into the future? And I'm thinking specifically, I mean, obviously there's the question of sort of regulations that are, you know, sort of who knows exactly where things are going. I know we have a whole separate sort of project around PFAS, and we're, you know, very early in all of that. And, you know, we'll want to be thinking more about what, you know, obviously source reductions, but then also what can we do on our end. But I'm wondering also how it plays in on the sort of consumer side. You know, I think I saw an article last week about, you know, kind of highlighting PFAS getting into sort of consumer goods through, you know, sewerage district, not ours, but somewhere else. And just, did that go into the evaluation yet, or would that be part of the upcoming evaluation of, you know, I think we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're susceptible to, even if our product meets regulatory standards, if, you know, there's consumer concerns around PFAS, for example, that's in there, and how that could impact demand and what we can do with the products.
Thanks, Commissioner Foster. So yes, emerging contaminants like PFAS was considered as part of the study, and it was considered in the lens of, it was one of the drivers that we identified on the regulatory side and the end use side as to product types of products we would be looking at, right? And so from the regulatory side, we looked at, if we choose a product that gets regulated for an emerging contaminant, will an enhanced biosolids product still be okay? And the literature and the technologies looked at showed that some Class A treatments can have an impact on emerging contaminants, but some others don't. And it's still kind of inconclusive as to complete elimination of, you know, PFAS, but certainly could be reduction. So that's on like the regulatory side, if you were regulated by a number, so to say. Then on the consumer side, we did not fully go in and ask about, you know, concerns about emerging contaminants on the consumer side. During our focus group interviews with potential consumers and customers, namely in the agricultural sector, you know, it came up in a sense that that's something that folks heard about, but there really wasn't anything pointing to a concern at that point of a linkage to a fertilizer product and maybe growing crop or something like that, because we're, you know, this isn't a drinking water concern. There's no wells and things like that, as biosolids are regulated for placement of those types of structures. But of course, when we look at the market viability of any product, we will have to further investigate, you know, that side of things. So we got a little preliminary information, said that the data really wasn't there. People weren't concerned. The customer base we were focusing on, which is namely agricultural and other maybe turf or, you know, large scale growing We weren't looking at the individual homeowner market like a Milorganite, right? Not to say that that isn't there. If we're looking at an enhanced product, we would maybe look towards that, but that could be way further down the line, and we may have more information on how some of these emerging contaminants are handled. And then again, you mentioned our other PFAS program. We don't have data yet, which we're anxiously awaiting. So as we get that, that could also further inform what types of products that we maybe go with. And as we start piloting and creating, we could also get further data to help inform that as well.
That all sounds great. And maybe as we continue with this initiative, just kind of highlighting wherever we're at the moment with that side of things. I mean, in my mind, it's almost is its own sort of challenge / opportunity. And sounds like you're thinking about it in the right ways. But to me, yeah, this question of like who, I think it's really different if we have sort of more industrial, customers, consumers who might have a different expectation around and acceptance with certain levels of contaminants versus sort of direct, individual consumers on products might have a different threshold. So I think that'll be an important consideration as we're thinking about kind of longer term viability with the products. So thanks for the details.
Beth?
Thanks for the great presentation, Marty. And my question is related to grants, and that is around, the contaminants, and more around the environmental impact over time, because as we concentrate contaminants in this mixture, we're going to be sequestering some of them, especially the recalcitrant ones. And so thinking about like the longer term, what's going to happen on farm fields, and, is that going to stay in the soil? Is it going to leach out? Is it going to be taken up by crops? I think those kind of questions will need to kind of keep on track with the science of what might be happening with those, so that we kind of are like ahead of the game as far as those kind of issues come up, because I know that there's right now a lot of unknowns with that. So that's just kind of a thought and a comment on that.
Thank you. I'm making notes. Appreciate the comment.
Okay, I had so if we're looking to transition to a Class B, and then over time we've transitioned to the Class A cake, Class B cake, from currently Class B liquid to Class B cake to Class A cake, and you kind of laid out a general time frame for that. I guess, a few things. Did you take our investment in our current Metro infrastructure into account? And you had some rough cost estimates. Like Ezra, I only read the executive summary. So I can't remember if that was taken into account. And then secondly, from a biosolid management standpoint, I guess I'm trying to think of a way to put this. Should we be putting all of our eggs into one basket? Or should we is it better to have a couple multiple options, or at least two options? So, we had the problem with Class B liquid, a couple of years ago. And maybe you don't face that same problem with Class A or Class B cake, but there may always be some type of failure that could occur, that you could face some type of option, where you end up with a problem in production or something, or market drops or something like that. So I guess those are kind of 2 points I wanted to raise. First, the question, and the second is that second point. And then third is, how do you see that transition? If we do this, how do you see this transition moving? And do you see us gradually getting away from the Metro Grow, and then, or do you see kind of almost like doing it all within a year or 2 year period, or what?
Thanks, Commissioner Hubble. So I think, to be clear, we cannot maintain multiple fertilizer nutrient management programs. We currently can't handle. So any transition will be with the end goal of moving toward a single product. You mentioned having multiple products to have, resilience. That's really the reason why we do all the planning and research up front first, because we know we can't realistically have an operational setup for multiple types of products because of what goes into creating them, the volume and scale that we're doing it at. So we would be locked into a product, but the idea is whatever product we have, that product itself should be flexible. So that's why we're starting with the Class B cake, because that product itself is flexible and we wouldn't be locked in. As we get down the road to an enhanced product, maybe some of that calculus changes, but hopefully we would have been getting planning data, scientific information to help us make that ultimate decision. The way I see it happening is as we explore and investigate the viability of a Class B cake product and we ramp up that production, that will decrease some pressure in our current liquid program. And our current liquid program has a lot of pressures that I outline. As we take away volume from liquid and move it into cake, that would be only a good thing. We'll have to continue maintaining liquid for a while because we can't just flip the switch and flip over to switching our production 100% to a product right away, but we can transition to it, and with the goal of a single product. Hopefully being Class B cake if that works out, because that's our flexible platform to continue moving forward. You asked a bunch of other questions, Commissioner Hovell, and I was frantically trying to write them down. So did I answer most of what you were looking for?
Well, one thing was, do they take into account the investment we have in the current Metro Grow operation?
Yes. So
with their study?
Yes. So when the study outlines economic costs for each of the product options, that's the cost if you were to 100% go to that route. So those costs don't contemplate, here's the cost of doing Class B cake program. Here's the added cost of your transition because you're going to have to do liquid for a while. That was not factored in. We're already factoring that in other ways, but those numbers in the report were the cost of switching to that particular product.
Okay. Can I follow up with something on the Class B cake? I think it was the one where they recommended a feasibility study, not a feasibility, a demand study to see if there's the demand for the product, kind of a market analysis. And so how does that, is there a general feeling before you're going into a market? Because you don't want, you start committing down and then the market analysis says, oh, wait a minute, we don't have much of a, and we probably wouldn't do that route, but that's probably that trigger point that you said we may have just jumped right away to Class A. But the Class B cake, if I remember correct, had the least cost associated with it. So that's good from our district ratepayer standpoint. So what is this feeling of Class B, and is it being produced elsewhere and being used elsewhere, or how is this kind of a new thing?
So Class B is not new. Class B cake, sorry, I should qualify. Class B cake is not new. There are many utilities around the country utilizing Class B cake programs. Our initial focus groups, we talked to potential agronomic customers. We talked about Class B cake. We had made some Class B cake in the past, so we had a little bit of something to go on. And we got some really good information on what makes a good Class B cake. And we weren't hitting all the points before. So we have some good target points here from an operational and dewatering standpoint to help us try to make a better Class B cake. And that's the whole point of the market analysis, is to say a Class B cake has to meet these criteria to be viable. And that would be how we operationally will have targets. So we just don't know yet. I think our past experience with Class B cake has given us some information. We luckily were allowing some others to experiment with it, and we got some even better information. And we're going to go forward from there.
Yeah, one of the problems with the Metro mix was that we never really found a good, strong market for it. And there may have been other problems too in his production. But, you know, that was always seen as kind of a promising alternative back at the time, or at least a secondary effort. Okay, Tom, and then Beth, you still have your hand up. Do you have more questions? No, she took it down. Okay, Tom, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Marty, for taking the time and updating us on what's going on here. I want to get to your questions. I'm comfortable with your roadmap and your identified decision points. I think you're moving at an appropriate pace. If you could be quicker, that'd be better, but that might be me. And it says here, does the commission have interests that could be better addressed? And that was a comment. I think we have an interest that just could be addressed here. And I'm thinking about it from the Yahara Winds and our permit side, is as we're working with, you know, the farm community, or even on our property, like in Westport, if you're going to work with them on this kind of product, maybe we can add some advice or ask the farmers if they want advice on other soil conservation measures, you know, kind of use this as a lead in to some other things that maybe we could do that would help the district in permitting and things like that. Just passing that on as, you know, when you get to the end of this, maybe that's something that could be accomplished as well. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Yeah, good idea, Tom, about other conservation measures. Grant?
Thanks. Yeah, I had one other thought and question around the question of energy use. So I think that's another one where we have the whole separate energy master plan kind of initiative in the works. And I know you touched on it in the report in some different ways, but I guess one, just interested in any more details you could share about just overall energy use. So obviously it's very energy intensive to truck liquids around by truck. And then there's an energy component in the drying activity. So yeah, I would just be interested in any more details about sort of comparisons between our options as it relates to energy use, and then hoping to have that also kind of be highlighted in the future. Obviously it's accounted for in terms of cost, you know, purchasing and using energy, but in this, I think, and in the environmental arena, but I'd really love to have overall energy use be kind of one of the areas of focus for us, and really thinking about big picture, how we continue to reduce our overall energy use.
Oh, sorry. Kind of gets back to Ezra's point. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think that's a really helpful question. And as we're coming to you very shortly with the energy master plan, which is taking kind of a global look at energy consumption and use. And while a detailed analysis of this part of our business isn't incorporated in some of the solutions, it was addressed in terms of looking at our overall energy footprint. So that there'll be that will enter the discussion somewhat in future commission deliberations.
That sounds great. And just to give feedback on your questions up here, also Marty, I'm also very comfortable with what you've got outlined in terms of pace. You know, probably what Tom said, which is the normal answer, right? Yeah, it looks good, but faster's always better. I would only just also add, I mean, it makes sense, I think, focusing on moving to B with the ability to move towards A, but also, you know, if as it relates to energy use, contaminants, just environmental benefits, I'd be in favor of positioning ourselves to move, you know, quicker to A, as that makes sense. So as we're working through the shorter term, if there are decisions around, you know, we could spend a little bit more money here that would allow us to be better positioned to move to A more quickly. I think those would be great things to bring back to the commission. And in general, from what I'm seeing now, would like to be kind of pushing ourselves more quickly towards being able to do the thing that has the higher environmental benefits. Thanks again.
Okay.
Commissioner Hubble, it may be helpful to hear from some of the commissioners we haven't heard from yet.
Right, I was going to be asking that. Yep, I was gonna be asking that, Michael, if anybody else had anything to say. We haven't heard from Sarah, Brad, and Ken, or
This-
Mary.
This is Brad. I'll just echo what some of the others have said, and I'm comfortable with the approach. Appreciate the presentation, and I would like to reinforce what Grant said about trying to get to Class A quicker if we can. Thank you.
Okay, we have Ken and Mary.
This is Commissioner Clark. I like the approach. I agree with the discussion back and forth here. I think there's a lot of moving parts from the regulatory community on this, and I like the approach that Marty has put together. I agree with the environmental strategy. I'm always concerned about spending money that we have to redo down the road, but I like Marty's approach right now, and I like the time frame that he's put together.
Okay, Mary, thanks, Ken.
Yeah, I just also want to echo the general agreement with the approach and the pace. And totally agree with Grant's comments about energy use. As you know, I think it would be really good to be able to see sort of side-by-side comparison of the alternatives in terms of energy use as an environmental impact, really. And the other thing I just wanted to mention was, I just read the front of the report, the executive summary, the next little section. And some people have been asking some pretty technical questions, and I think it would be helpful to know if some of those more technical questions actually have information, relevant information in the depths of the report. And it might be useful to just kind of, after this discussion, to look at the bigger report and see if there's any more useful information in there. It was a little daunting because of the length, but just a point, Marty, maybe you would know if any of the questions actually would be served by digging into some certain parts of the report. And I also wanted to echo Beth's comments about contaminants and how various methods of preparing the biosolids would address or not address different types of contaminants. I think that's always an important thing to keep in mind. But thanks. Yeah, I think this is all really good stuff.
Okay, Sarah?
Yeah, I don't have much else to add. I agree, comfortable with roadmap and pace. One of the things on the interests that could be addressed, I agree with Commissioner Wilson's kind of perspective about are there opportunities to incorporate other stakeholder conversations as we're doing this market research, and just taking advantage of that. I was thinking about stakeholder management as we're going through this process, and we've got, I think, an appropriately paced timeline to do that well, but it might offer some opportunities as we're doing that market research to incorporate other parts of stakeholder and owner community and all those sort of relationship management aspects of the work that we've been focused more on lately in a really powerful way. So I encourage you to keep doing that as you move this forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. So I think what I'm hearing is that the commission is generally comfortable with what was been identified. I think there's some say the pace is good, others would like to see it moved up a little bit, but a couple of the things that came up clearly were the energy consumption and how that works out at the different levels, as well as the emerging contaminants or the decrease, or what level of decrease you would say see as we move from Class B to Class A, and to make sure that it's a cost-effective amount, and that, as Ken said, we're not putting money into something that we end up having to redo. And then finally, I think it's that overall interest that Tom and then Sarah reiterated about our current stakeholders and making sure that we're always working toward the overall interests of the district and what else are we doing or could we do to benefit the district as a whole, more than just in the cake, and other aspects that we can do that help with pollution removal, phosphorus, or other things that would help it benefit the district and its other measures, such as your heroines or whatever. Okay. So I think that unless anybody else has anything else to add, I don't see any hands up. You got all that, Marty?
Good thing is we recorded, so I did write down a lot of notes, but I can go back and always
You can go
check, so
back
that's
and
a good
review.
thing now.
Yeah. Okay. So that will end our 4B, the study session on biosolids management. That will take us to the Chief Engineer and Director's report. Michael, your CED report.
I have a couple items for you this morning, commissioners. As part of our wastewater discharge permit, we are required to perform toxicity testing on the effluent in our receiving streams, both at Badfish Creek and Badger Mill Creek. And we do this on a rotating quarterly basis. Whole effluent toxicity testing, which is, summarized as wet or wet testing, refers to the aggregate toxic effect to aquatic organisms from all pollutants contained in our wastewater effluent. It is one way we implement Clean Water Act's prohibition on the discharge of toxic pollutants in toxic amounts. The wet tests measure wastewater's effects on specific organisms and their ability to survive, grow, and reproduce. For the second quarter, in our wet testing, when we were sampling Badfish Creek in May, we received a report from the lab indicating that we did not pass our chronic test for toxicity for the C. dubia organism. And this organism is a type of a very small, almost microscopic invertebrate. Some refer to it as like a water flea, and it is at kind of the bottom of the food chain. And that's why it's chosen for toxicity testing, because they reproduce quickly and react very quickly to pollutants. We looked back when we received this test 48 hours before the sample was taken, and to record to see if there were any abnormalities by operations or our pre-treatment that could have contributed to the failed test. And this information was compiled along with the test results, and we notified the DNR on May 27th. The lab noted that other facilities have failed toxicity tests recently and speculated it might be caused by increased presence of cleaning chemicals. We decided to continue to narrow our investigation into the failed test and have the lab perform additional testing to see if the toxicity was removed. These additional tests passed, indicating that toxicity was removed over time or passed through, and the toxicity is verified to be chemical and not biological. It is therefore not likely to be a toxicant. But our next steps are, we're continuing to monitor this because of the failed test. Our permit requires us to complete 2 retests within 90 days of this failed test. And we have notified the DNR of our retest schedule. So far, both retests have shown no toxicity, or I should say, both tests have to show no toxicity in the future. And if we do, then we have to do continual retesting. So that is the next step in the process. And if there's any new information, I will follow back with you during my CED update. Maybe I'll pause there to see if there are any questions about that.
Okay. Michael, I see Beth's got a question, and then I had a question. Beth?
Hi, Michael. Thank you for the update. Just a quick question. Is this like a composite sample or a grab sample? And have we ever had a failure in the past at Badfish Creek with this particular organism?
Marty, can you answer that question? Those
Yes.
details about.
So the first question, it is a composite sample. So we put the samplers in the stream near our outfall and we let it run for, oh my gosh, multiple days. So it's a composite sample over multiple days. That's the water that the lab uses for their wet testing. Have we ever had this happen before? In my knowledge, it has happened once before, a long time ago. We did the same investigation, found that there was some weird stuff that we did at the plant. So in the retest, everything went fine. So we haven't really had to enact that third step that Michael said is, if we fail the retest, there's additional steps. We've never encountered that at the district yet. So, and hopefully this will be the same situation.
Okay, thanks.
My question, Michael or Marty, or maybe for Eric, is do we know at what part of the treatment, is it the new disinfection system or is it something else? That are we able to narrow that down as to what part of the process may not have fully functioned correctly?
Well, it's an effluent sample, so we're not sampling within the plant. So the best we can do is go back and look at what was happening at the plant during the time of the test, before the test. And if we did find that something was happening at the plant, then maybe we could narrow down to where or what. But our investigation showed there were some happenings at the plant, but none of them would have been impacting our effluent in the way that would have failed the test. So.
Okay, so is this an organism that you would expect to be our new disinfection system to take care of? Is there an organism that would be taken care of in some other part of the process?
So the organism is used by the lab to determine if our effluent has toxicity. They're not looking at our effluent for organisms. So we sample our effluent, get a bunch of water over time, send that to the lab. The lab takes that water, puts their laboratory organisms in that water, and over a course of a week, look at reproduction and growth and death and survival.
Okay, so the organism is a element of potential toxicity. Is it always related to the increased toxicity?
So the organism is the test for toxicity, the canary in the
Right.
coal mine. It's always the same organisms for consistency.
I got it. Okay, so it's kind of the canary in the coal mine situation. So if it's there, then it's because of the toxicity levels. Got it. I didn't know if it could be there, but without toxicity levels or not. Okay.
So it's not necessarily the presence of the organism, it's the behavior of the organism.
Oh, I see.
Could I chime in just real quickly? I think you're talking about Daphnia, the water flea test, and that is a very common organism in freshwater, freshwater ecology, and it's a very standard test for toxicity, for aquatic toxicity, to test on these Daphnia. It's a very standardized test. So they're sort of like the lab rats of the aquatic world. So that's kind of the nature of the test.
Marty, it might be also helpful to clarify, or maybe Michael, as Commissioner Hubble had asked about disinfection, and when we said that other plants had gotten some similar results because of cleaning, is that because of cleaning as in disinfection, or cleaning as in the cleaning products in people's homes that they may have been using more of over the last year because of the pandemic?
So they identify the chemical as being disinfectant/surfactants, which would be chemicals people use cleaning their homes. completely unrelated, not related at all to our effluent disinfection process, which is a UV process that utilizes 0 chemicals.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the toxicity levels that were shown should have been taken care of by our UV disinfection system or not. That was my, so the water fly is indicative of a certain level of toxicity. And I was wondering if the UV disinfection system is supposed to take care of that toxicity, or is it supposed to happen somewhere else within the treatment process? That's the gist of my question.
The UV disinfection is for, biological disinfection. So when we do our toxicity testing, there can be impacts to the organisms used that could be biological or chemical. In our particular case, we did those additional tests that Michael indicated where we showed it was not biological. So the answer would be no, or yes, the UV has been taking care of everything. And this was a chemical instance, which we were tracing back to potential increase in surfactants being used flushing through the systems.
Which raises the question of why we didn't see it late last year, after, in the summer and fall of last year. But because people were probably actually even cleaning more, household chemical use last year with the pandemic than they were, say, this May, as more and more people are vaccinated, and I think their cleaning processes probably decreased. But
Well, I was going to say, that is the value of the testing we do when we identify something like this. Now it allows us to do some upstream research and to look for trends. And it may be household, it may be a new industry, it might be something we're unaware of that's happening. If this trend would continue, then it becomes a pre-treatment strategy or a pollution prevention strategy if we see this continue.
Okay, Beth?
I have to say that in my past, I have done toxicity testing with Daphnia and also on surfactants. And most of the common cleaning surfactants are pretty easily removed during the wastewater treatment process. So, and it's the only ones that aren't are the longer chained branched kind of surfactants that are more recalcitrant. So I think that it is a real stretch to say that it is cleaning products or surfactants that's causing the toxicity. It could be many, many other things. And until really we have any kind of results that show that it's specifically cleaning products, I think it's a little dangerous to jump to that conclusion when we really, I'm not sure that we have any evidence for that. So I would suggest that we be really careful about, putting out kind of these kind of thoughts when we really don't have the data to show that that's really what it is, when it could be a lot of other things that may be causing the toxicity.
Okay, yeah, very good comment. Thank you, Beth. Okay, Michael, you have anything else in your report?
I do, yes. Thank you for all of those comments. The pumping station 7 force main emergency repairs are scheduled. Visor Sewer will be on site and will begin installation July 7th. They'll be on site before that preparing, and we'll be performing the work, which should be completed by the middle of July, and where we hope to have the pipe back into service by the end of July, and after the curing of the liner. And so we're hopeful to get this project wrapped up, and then that allows us to do more testing to see, to make sure the pipe is tight. So we'll have a more detailed report once that that work is completed. So that concludes my report.
Okay, and then we have the owner community meeting on June 17th. And invites were sent out. I think I'm going to probably be out of town for that at that point, so I'll be missing that.
Thought Amanda could give a brief update on what's going to happen next week if we have time, President Hubble.
Yeah, Amanda, why don't you do that?
Absolutely. So good morning, Commissioners. Amanda Wagner, Communications and Public Affairs Manager. So our owner community meeting is next week, Thursday, the 17th, starting at 9 a.m. and is virtual. So the theme of this quarter's, I should say, owner community meeting is all about collaboration. And so we've actually partnered with some of our owner communities on the presentation. So Theron Jacobson from Verona will be joining Bruce Borelli and Eric Jellin from the district to talk in part about the Eastside Interceptor District Pumping Station 17 Force Main Relief project that we're doing together there, but also use that sort of as a launching off point to talk about other ways and means from more of a capital perspective that the district and our owner communities can collaborate. So that'll be a great presentation. And then we also have another presentation more on the pollution prevention side of the equation, where Amy Irwin from the Village of McFarland will be joining district's very own Emily Jones to talk about salt savers. And then Emily will also talk about other ways from a pollution prevention perspective that the district and our owner communities can work together. So the kind of crux of it is to have our communities talk to our communities, but also inspire ideas and opportunities, both practical and creative, for working together. So we're really looking forward to next week's meeting.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Let's see, that will take us to Vanessa. You're going to fill in for Paul on the regulatory and legal report.
Correct. Good morning, everyone. My name is Vanessa Wishart from Stafford Rosenbaum. So you have a regulatory report in your packet. I'll highlight just a couple of points. On the legislative front, we included two bills relating to PFAS that have previously been introduced in the legislature, but I want to give an update that there was one additional bill introduced in the Assembly this week, AB 392, and there's actually a hearing being held on that bill in front of the Energy and Utility Committee today, starting, I think, 9:30. And that bill would create a PFAS municipal grant program. So we'll certainly keep you updated on any movement on that bill. It would apply to sewerage districts as well as other municipalities. On the regulatory side, the Department of Natural Resources is continuing to move forward on emergency and permanent rules for operator certification. Those rules would allow a third-party online administration of operator certification exams. I have heard that we will probably see rule language on that rule here in the near future. Turning back to the PFAS side of things, there are a couple of regulatory updates. There was a statement of scope released for Cycle 11 compounds for groundwater and drinking water rules. Those Cycle 11 compounds include, I think it's 16 new PFAS compounds in addition to some other compounds, TCE, and some pesticides. The statement of scope hearing was held last week on Friday, and then the DNR is accepting comments on that statement of scope through today. That will just start the process, as we're seeing with these other rules, moving forward through the rulemaking process for new groundwater standards and drinking water standards. And then in addition to that Cycle 11 scope statement, the EIA for groundwater standards for PFOS and PFOA is out for public comment. One correction in this regulatory report, the public comment period on that rule is actually open until June 13th, not June 11th. And then one other point I want to touch on, there had been a quite out of date scope statement on anti-degradation. That rule, revisions to primarily NR 207, was just rescoped and approved by the governor on May 13th. So we will probably start to see movement on updates to DNR's rules on anti-degradation here over the next year or so. Those are the highlights. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Oops. Anybody have any questions for Vanessa? Okay, I don't see any hands up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to the future meeting schedule, which is in the packet. I think the next June meeting, I think it's Ken and Ezra are going to be gone, correct? And so if anybody else is going to be gone, let Michael or Janelle know.
I'll be there for the commission meeting, Tom, just not the owner community meeting next week.
Okay, thanks, Ezra. Future agenda topics? Anybody have anything else? Any other business? And a motion to adjourn? Motion by
I will
Commissioner
move we
Wilson.
adjourn. I'm back.
Yeah, motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by
I'll second it, Murphy.
Commissioner Murphy to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries.
I was surprised, Tom, that you actually had to call the meeting to order, because I don't know how you would have adjourned for the last month.
Well, it was a struggle finding somebody to do it, Tom.
Oh, I saw Ken happy to make the motion.
Yep. Hard to replace. Okay, everybody have a good rest of the week. Thank you. Nice having you back, Tom.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Stay safe.
Bye.